Let me ask you something. You had an idea, a project you wanted to start, a skill you wanted to learn, a business, a channel, a book, a habit you wanted to build. And before you took the first step, you told yourself you needed one more thing first: more research, a better plan, more time, the right conditions. So why is it that years later, so many of those ideas are still sitting exactly where you left them? The answer is uncomfortable, and James Clear gives it directly in a collection of essays that quietly dismantles one of the most persistent beliefs people carry about getting things done. He says the plan you have been waiting to finish before you begin was never going to finish. Not because you are lazy, not because you lack discipline, but because waiting to feel ready is not a phase you pass through on the way to starting. It is a strategy for never starting at all. He calls this the power of imperfect starts, not because starting badly is something to aim for, but because a start that is messy, incomplete, and far from ideal is quietly working in your favor, while the search for the perfect beginning is quietly working against you. In this video, I am going to walk you through 8 ideas Clear explores across these essays. Not just what they are, but why they work. Why capable, intelligent people fall for the trap of waiting anyway. And what a genuinely different relationship with starting actually looks like. This is not a flashy video. Some of what you are about to hear will feel almost too simple to matter. But if you have ever had a folder full of half-formed plans and nothing to show for them, what you are about to hear might finally explain why. Stay with me. Idea number 1: waiting for the perfect moment. This is the quiet belief almost everyone carries without noticing it. Before I start, I need to feel ready. I need the right conditions. I need to know more. The logic feels responsible. Prepare fully, then act, and you will avoid mistakes. Clear does not argue that preparation is worthless. What he argues is that most people confuse the feeling of readiness with the fact of ability. Readiness is an emotional state. It does not arrive on a schedule, and it does not arrive because you gathered enough information. It arrives, if it arrives at all, after you have already started. Here is the specific problem. When you compare your current, unfinished state to someone years ahead of you, you are comparing your beginning to their middle. Their tools look better. Their instincts look sharper. Their path looks obvious in hindsight. And so you conclude, quietly and wrongly, that you need to close that gap before you are allowed to take a first step. The person who waits to feel equipped keeps circling the runway, gathering credentials and gear and advice, mistaking motion for progress. The person who starts imperfectly is already airborne, learning things the well-prepared person has not yet discovered, because they can only be discovered in motion. The trap is not that preparation is bad. The trap is that preparation without a start quietly becomes a permanent, respectable-looking form of procrastination. You feel productive while gathering. You are not moving while gathering. Clear points to something almost nobody admits out loud. An imperfect start actually generates information a perfect plan cannot. It shows you where your assumptions were wrong within days, instead of months. It exposes the gap between what you imagined and what actually happens, and that gap is exactly what refinement is supposed to work on. Without it, refinement has nothing real to refine. Idea number 2: effectiveness over efficiency. Most productivity advice tells you to do more, move faster, fill your day, optimize every hour, squeeze more output from the same amount of time. Clear draws a distinction most people never separate cleanly. Efficiency asks how much you can get done. Effectiveness asks whether you are doing the right thing at all. And these are not the same question. A person can be remarkably efficient at tasks that do not matter. They answer every email within minutes. They clear their inbox daily. They attend every meeting fully prepared. And at the end of the year, none of it moved them closer to anything they actually cared about, because the underlying tasks were never worth optimizing in the first place. Effectiveness comes first. You have to know what the right work is before speed becomes valuable. Otherwise, you are simply getting faster and faster at climbing a ladder that is leaning against the wrong wall. This does not mean speed is worthless. It means speed applied to the wrong target produces impressive-looking motion and very little actual progress. Ask what matters before you ask how to do more of it. There is a reason this mistake is so common. Efficiency is easy to measure. You can count emails sent, tasks closed, hours logged. Effectiveness is harder to see day to day because it only shows up over months in whether the work actually moved you somewhere you wanted to go. People default to optimizing what is easy to measure, even when it is not what actually matters. Idea number 3. When the 80-20 rule stops working. The 80-20 rule is one of the most quoted ideas in productivity. Roughly 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. So identify that 20%, focus there, and cut the rest. Clear does not dismiss this. In a mature project, in a business you already understand, this rule is genuinely powerful. But he points out something almost nobody mentions. In the early stages of anything, you do not yet know which 20% is the valuable one. If you narrow too early before you have enough experience to know what actually works, you are not focusing. You are guessing and calling the guess a strategy. Early on, breadth is not waste. Breadth is how you discover which 20% deserves your attention in the first place. The mistake is applying a late-stage rule to an early-stage problem. Explore first, narrow later, reverse that order, and the 80-20 rule stops being wisdom and starts being a way to specialize in the wrong thing with great efficiency. Think of it as two different seasons that require two different rules. In the exploring season, the goal is coverage, trying enough different approaches to see what the landscape actually looks like. In the focusing season, the goal is depth, cutting everything except the few things already proven to work. Applying the focusing rule during the exploring season is how people end up experts in something that was never worth the effort. Idea number 4. Building a chain of good habits. Willpower is the advice most people receive about consistency. Try harder, want it more, push through resistance with sheer determination. Clear's essays return again and again to a quieter mechanism. A visible streak, a chain of marked days that you do not want to break. This is not about willpower at all. It is about designing an environment where consistency becomes the path of least resistance instead of a daily negotiation with yourself. The specific insight is this. Motivation fluctuates day to day, but the sight of an unbroken chain creates its own pressure, separate from how you feel about the task itself. Miss one day and the world does not end. Miss the same day twice in a row and the chain, and often the habit itself, quietly dies. This reframes the goal. It is not to feel motivated every day. It is to make not breaking the chain slightly more uncomfortable than doing the small version of the task. Small and visible beats large and occasional, almost every time over a long enough period. There is also a recovery rule hidden inside this idea, and it matters as much as the streak itself. One missed day is a normal part of a real life. 2 missed days in a row is the beginning of a new habit, quietly forming in the opposite direction. The chain does not demand perfection. It demands that a single slip never becomes a pattern. Idea number 5. Anthony Trollope's 15 minutes. Most people believe meaningful creative work requires long, uninterrupted blocks of time. A free morning, a quiet weekend, the mythical moment when everything else clears out of the way. Clear tells the story of the novelist Anthony Trollope, who held a demanding full-time job and still produced more than 40 novels in his lifetime. His method was not inspiration. It was a strict 15-minute quota, timed with a watch on his desk, completed before his day job began, every single day, regardless of how the writing was going. The specific mechanism matters. 15 minutes is small enough that resistance rarely wins. It is small enough to fit before any excuse can form. And repeated daily, without depending on mood or free time, it compounds into a body of work that dwarfs what most people produce while waiting for the mythical open afternoon that never actually arrives. The lesson is not that 15 minutes is magic. It is that consistency at a small, guaranteed scale beats intensity at a large, unreliable one. The person waiting for 4 free hours a week is, in practice, producing nothing. The person committing to 15 guaranteed minutes a day is, in practice, producing a career. Do the arithmetic and the size of the gap becomes obvious. 15 minutes a day, every day, adds up to more than 90 hours a year, applied with total consistency. 4 free hours a week, in a life that rarely delivers 4 free hours a week, adds up to whatever is left after everything else has already taken its share. Small and guaranteed beats large and imaginary. Idea number 6. 5 steps to a more creative brain. Creativity is often treated as a trait. Some people have it. Some people do not. You are either the kind of person who generates ideas or you are not. Clear's essays push back on this directly. Creative output across the people he studied follows patterns that can be deliberately built. Exposure to a wide range of source material. Regular, unglamorous practice rather than waiting for inspiration. Deliberate constraints that force new combinations instead of endless open-ended freedom. Physical movement and rest built into the process rather than treated as time away from it. And consistent output over polished perfection, because volume is what eventually produces quality. None of these steps are exotic. That is precisely the point. Creativity in this framing is not a personality trait you either have or lack. It is closer to a set of habits, and habits can be built by anyone willing to repeat them. This reframing matters because it removes the excuse waiting quietly behind most unstarted creative work. If creativity were a fixed trait, not having it would justify never trying. If it is a set of repeatable habits instead, the only thing standing between you and more creative output is whether you actually practice them. Idea number 7. The distractions you love the most. The obvious distractions are easy to spot and easy to resist. Nobody struggles to recognize that endless scrolling is pulling them away from meaningful work. Clear identifies a more dangerous category. The distractions you genuinely love that do not love you back. A hobby that consumes your evenings without moving you toward anything you actually value. A side conversation, a side project, a side relationship to your work that feels productive because you enjoy it, while quietly consuming the hours your real priority needed. These are harder to cut, precisely because cutting them does not feel like discipline. It feels like loss. And so people protect their most dangerous distractions longer than their most obvious ones, mistaking enjoyment for value. The specific test Clear offers is simple. Does this activity love you back? Does it build towards something, or does it simply take the hours and give you a pleasant feeling in exchange? Both can look identical from the outside. Only one of them compounds into anything. This is uncomfortable precisely because it asks you to be honest about something you enjoy, not something you already suspect is a waste of time. It is far easier to cut a habit you dislike than one that genuinely brings you pleasure, even when the second one is quietly costing you more. Idea number 8. Saying no to busy, yes to commitment. Being busy is often treated as proof of importance. A full calendar, a constant stream of requests answered, involvement in everything that crosses your path. Clear draws a sharp line between busyness and commitment. Busyness is saying yes to whatever shows up. Commitment is saying no to almost everything, so that the small number of things you say yes to receive the depth they actually require. The specific cost is this. Every yes to something outside your focus is a quiet no to going deeper in the area where your real progress lives. You cannot be broadly available and also be building genuine expertise in one direction. The two consume the same finite hours. This does not mean isolation or rigidity. It means treating your attention as a resource with a real limit and protecting the direction you have chosen to go deep in a way that occasional interesting requests are not allowed to quietly erode. Most people do not overcommit because they lack judgment. They overcommit because every individual yes seems small and reasonable in the moment it is asked. It is only the sum of many small, reasonable yeses that quietly becomes a life with no room left for the one thing that actually mattered. Now let us be honest about this collection. These essays were not written as chapters of a single unified book. They are drawn from years of Clear's own writing on productivity, focus, and habits, later gathered and translated into a single Persian edition. That origin shows. Some pieces feel sharp and specific, built around one clear mechanism you can apply immediately. Others feel thinner, closer to a restatement of ideas Clear covers more thoroughly elsewhere, including in his own best-selling work on habits. Read start to finish in one sitting, the repetition becomes noticeable. Several essays circle the same underlying point about small, consistent action from slightly different angles. This is not a flaw exactly. It is simply the nature of a collection built from independent pieces rather than a single sustained argument. None of this makes the ideas wrong. It makes the format matter. A genuinely useful engagement with this collection means treating it less like a book to finish and more like a set of separate tools, read a little at a time, tested individually against your own actual work, rather than consumed in one long sitting and set aside. There is also a fair question about depth. Each essay makes its point quickly, in a few pages, with a clean example and a clear takeaway. That clarity is a strength for a reader who wants something actionable today. It is a limitation for a reader looking for rigorous evidence, nuance, or the kind of sustained argument a single-author book builds chapter by chapter. Clear is, first and foremost, a communicator of ideas he has tested in his own life and observed in others, not a researcher publishing original studies. The value here is applicability, not proof. So what do you actually take from this? The most valuable thing this collection offers is a specific question to ask about anything you have been postponing. What is the smallest imperfect version of this I could start today? Not the finished version, not the impressive version, the smallest version that still counts as beginning. When you can answer that question honestly, the excuse of not being ready quietly loses its power, because readiness was never the actual requirement. The second most valuable thing is the shift in what counts as progress. Progress is not the plan you refine for the 10th time. Progress is the imperfect draft, the 15 minutes actually completed, the unbroken chain on the calendar. Refinement has its place, but only after something exists to refine. The third thing is simply this. The gap between people who build something and people who only plan to is rarely talent, and it is rarely luck. It is far more often the willingness to begin before every condition felt right, and to keep the chain unbroken on the days it did not feel good to. None of this requires a personality transplant. It does not require becoming a naturally disciplined person or waking up with more motivation than you had yesterday. It requires shrinking the task in front of you until starting it is easier than avoiding it, and then repeating that small action until it stops needing willpower at all. That is the actual offer of this collection, not a shortcut, not a guarantee. A quieter, more useful question to ask yourself the next time you catch yourself waiting to feel ready. What you do with that question is entirely up to you. Thanks for watching all the way through. The perfect start was never coming. It was never supposed to.